Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. So, talking a little bit about which direction is the market going. If you've been paying attention since, I'd say, since about April. What are we looking at? April 20th. The market's been holding relatively below the 24K mark. As I've said before, 24K previously in the past, when we were on our way down and the market was stepping down, 24K was definitely an area where the market halted. You can see it right here when we were on our way down. For the better part, about a trading day or so, we tried to rally back. We bounced off it here initially, came to another bounce here, and then eventually gapped down into a re-rally, trying to push for 25K, and then of course Peter panned over the edge, and then coming back, as you can see, the market's still holding below that 24K mark. And it's primarily looking at the markets, where to invest. I watch a lot of different YouTubers, and I read a lot of different articles talking about all the bad news, basically, between the 30 million plus who are recorded as being unemployed and seeking for unemployment. And of course, airlines stated most of them took PPP loans, and stated that most of them will definitely be cutting jobs come October 1st, because that's the requirement, is that to take the PPP loan, you have to hold without cutting jobs till the end of September. And they said, fine, we'll manage till the end, and then we're literally going to cut huge numbers of jobs. We've seen companies like, for example, Uber recently cut 3,700 jobs. You can see there was an article here. And of course, they did this via the internet. Most of these employees were working from home. Since there are not enough people who are utilizing Uber, then of course, naturally, a lot of the people who work in the back office and are responsible for recruiting and customer service, unfortunately, lost their jobs. In the coming months ahead, we know that restaurants, etc., will start to be opening. We've seen in certain areas, for example, like in Georgia and of other states across the nation, where they've relaxed shelter in place, and they've seen a spike in corona cases. And that's just going to be natural, as many of these places either have not hit their peak in terms of the number of cases, or realistically speaking, the virus is just that transmittable. And I think I kind of go over this from like a day-to-day perspective. As you can see, we're still pumping out numbers like this. During the weekend it does slow down, and that's primarily because the testing slows down. It's not because people are just less infectious over the weekend. It's just, realistically speaking, in terms of the amount of people who are working on the weekends, and how are they working 24 hours a day? More than likely not. And then the weekend comes around, and then people naturally have off. And so that's why you see the testing numbers over the weekend are a little bit lighter. And then by Monday, Tuesday, they kind of roll right back into where we were and where we have been for the better part of the last couple of months, is where we're seeing the cases kind of spike. We've seen cases spike in areas where, for example, like in meatpacking industry, where places like Tyson, for example, have had numerous outbreaks. They've had to close down factories. Some other places across the country, like in New York, not New York, in the States, and as well as in places like Canada, are also experiencing the same thing, where once their employees kind of go back to work and they're kind of in these tightly packed areas, they are prone to catching the coronavirus. And one of the easier ways that individuals can, of course, minimize the spread of the virus is by utilizing an N95 mask. This, of course, is a similar N95 mask that, of course, you can wear as such. As a nurse, this is typically what type of mask that we utilize. Actually, we use the duckbills, which are a little bit better than some of the other masks. There's some N95 masks that will have like a little valve, but those masks are not good, since the virus can be transmitted asymptomatically. Those little valve masks are for dispensing heat. And so those masks, you can feel the air come out, right? It's unfiltered air. And of course, things can be spread asymptomatically. And one of the easier ways, of course, like I said, especially in densely packed areas where it's much more easier to contract the virus, literally just by speaking, a simple cough, maybe just clearing your throat. We naturally produce mucus every day normally. And of course, in times when, for example, like when the season comes around for seasonal allergies, like myself, I get seasonal allergies, and you get the runny nose, you may have sneezing, maybe a little bit of coughing, etc. And that's an easy way, especially in those close-knit environments where you're literally working shoulder to shoulder, where the virus can be easily transmitted. And so, of course, we're seeing more people utilize face masks, regular surgical masks. But realistically speaking, to not catch the virus, you want to utilize an N95 mask, and then of course put a surgical mask over it, which is what we do when we're coming in close contact, to preserve the masks, because we typically utilize them one for an entire shift, right? So for an entire 12-hour shift, we're using one N95 duckbill mask, and then placing a surgical mask over it, and then using a face shield. As we run out of the typical masks that have the face shield attached to them, we now just have the one face shield that you kind of wear like the old school welders use, where they use that visor that goes over their whole entire face. And that's what we use, and we've been using, I have had mine for weeks now, and we just clean them shift to shift. You bring them back whenever you have your next shift, etc. And so that's an easier way for most people to excuse me, not contract the coronavirus. And of course, utilizing things like hand sanitizer, primarily because most people don't wash their hands very thoroughly. Even nurses. That's why even within hospitals, you'll see like the little hand sanitizer dispensers by the doors when you walk in, even with hand sanitizers that you can carry. And it's typically because most people don't effectively wash their hands well. Even medical staff typically don't wash their hands very well, and that's why you see this transition from utilizing soap and water, even though soap and water is better, but most people just don't wash their hands very well. And so in most businesses of course should utilize things like hand sanitizers. It makes it much easier for your staff members can quickly utilize it in killing most of whatever the bacteria and viruses that they may have on their hands. And then they've utilized something to minimize the amount of virus that comes from their mouth. And then they're utilizing some sort of a shield, because you still can receive the virus and get transmitted the virus through the ducts in the corners of your eyes. And so more businesses, especially businesses that come in close contact with people, think of restaurants, think of bars, supermarkets, maybe even police officers, as police officers kind of have to peek into and speak close to the two drivers. Those are the things that they're going to want to utilize to minimize the virus. And of course, the more we see this, if you start to notice this, if you start to see where businesses are pushing for this, it makes it much easier for them to be able to do business. Now, with that said, I'm sure I've seen videos of people saying, my constitutional rights, because they're not allowed into, supermarkets or into other areas, and individuals get upset and saying that, my rights are being removed, etc. But realistically speaking, people's lives are at stake. Many have lost their lives. We're approaching 81,000, and the virus, it's still not over. We're still very much alive and kicking within the States, and this will easily, as they said, hit the 100K more than likely by the end of the month. We're pushing towards 100,000 people that will unfortunately lose their lives in the United States, and it's not over. We're approaching 300,000 deaths across the country. But from an investing standpoint, because the federal government is now the news, of course, as we've been waiting for, that the federal government is now buying ETFs, which of course ETFs are just basically a basket of stocks, right? Maybe you're looking at things like was one ETF that I used to be in is SPYG, right, which is a index spider. I think it's the top 500. I think it's the top 50 of the spiders. And of course, this makes it difficult to decide, okay, well, what should I buy? Like it literally artificially inflates the value of many companies. And so what is it that I have been doing is I've been continually adding to my account, because it's a little bit more difficult. The government is artificially kind of pushing up the market. We don't know how long this is going to last, how investors are going to react. The market is always forward. The market is always forward thinking, looking to future earnings. Like, for example, Disney opening up their parks in China. And then, of course, the market looks at it as market rallies, right? So Disney said that they won't be opening, of course, their parks and theme parks in the United States, at least not yet. But of course, we are seeing them being opened overseas, which makes it a little bit, like I said, makes it a little bit harder to think, well, how am I supposed to invest? And literally what I am doing is I'm just continually adding. I've started this account back in November 25th with just $200, and then we're subsequently now I've got 8,000 total invested into my dividend portfolio, and then subsequently I put in for my Roth IRA, and I've just shy just shy of the 1,000 mark, and I've got a couple of more trades coming in for an additional 125 for today, and I've got a couple of more trades going in today. I'm just adding a little bit, trying to round out my portfolio in terms of my risk. Most of my loss is coming in from CCL. I would say between CCL is probably my biggest loss is primarily because I got into the stock way too early. I think my average is like 18. So for the little bit of money that I have in it, which is where my biggest loss is, and not quite sure how Carnival Cruises is going to manage people going out on cruises, but they have said that I believe August 1st is their first resumption of cruise services. Things that are going to be a lot easier are like tourism, which is kind of why I like JetBlue. JetBlue was the first company that said that they were requiring face masks, which is a good stance to take because it's the only way that people are going to be able to kind of resume excuse me, it's the only way people are going to be able to resume travel. I'm a person who enjoys traveling. I typically travel about every 2 to 3 months, and the only way that you're going to be able to do that, if you've noticed, I think United had a flight, and it was primarily a flight full of medical workers that was free to move doctors and nurses around to different parts of the state. They didn't charge them, so they were either bringing them back home or bringing them into areas where maybe they were moving assignment as a travel nurse. So they're moving them into areas, and then people were taking pictures of, we're all densely packed. But that's pretty much how we are even when we're at the nursing station. A lot of times people aren't even wearing their masks when they're at the nursing station. Typically we only wear them when we're going into patients' rooms or we're coming in contact with patients. I see a lot of people that just don't wear it at the nurses station, even though we are like somewhat apart, maybe like 4 or 5 feet apart from computer to computer. But easily most of those people were wearing a surgical mask or an N95 mask, so they were very much protected from other healthcare workers that were working and they're on the plane. We'll probably take a look at that in a second. So I do like JetBlue, and like I said, I am just literally adding to my dividend portfolio where I perceive. For example, like Enbridge has been doing really well. ENB is another oil stock that's been doing very well. I wish I had invested more. You can see it's really starting to come up, really starting to break out, retesting where it fell off post coronavirus. You can see right here where it kind of gapped out, and now we're testing that. So I really wish I would have gotten some Enbridge as an oil stock. I really wish I'd have gotten more down here. But my recommendation is, if you're still able to invest, even if it is a small amount of money, just be in the habit of always putting in a little bit and do it over the course of the month. If you're averaging, let's say, maybe $200 or $300, kind of put that in, divvy that up throughout the week, every week, and then just kind of add it in over the week, which is basically what I'm doing. I'm adding a little bit more now. And typically my minimum goal is to add at least 1,000 per month, which we're right on track. I've had this portfolio, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4. We're just coming into our 5th month, and I'm well ahead of my goal. And of course, I'll probably be trying to catch up. I need to catch up to my my IRA, and we're in the 5th month, so typically I should be about at 2,500. So I'm going to catch up in my IRA and then resume putting money, because I have my old one with TD, and then I stopped TD and I decided to go with M1 currently for my new IRA. So I'm basically trying to catch up with that. So like I said, that's basically how I've been doing it. I've got a couple of buys. My buys are typically small. I usually add roughly about 10% of my of my allotment. So for example, if I already have 300 invested into T and I want to buy a little more T, I'll typically buy 10% of my current value. So whatever my value is, I've got $300 worth of tea. I'll add another $30 as I'm buying, especially if I think that tea is going to be moving up or if I see a slight pullback. But I want to make sure to try to get in as much of my dividend portfolio that you can see right here. I'm definitely into, unfortunately, I've got a little bit of risk. These were dividend payers, but then the airlines as well as the Carnival Cruise pulled all their dividends, and I would like to move these from my dividend portion of my portfolio and to kind of move them into my risk portfolio. But I have to get M1 to do that. There's no way for me to do it without contacting M1 and then having them halt trading on my account and then moving those trades over, and then they will resume trades, and then it will reflect that way. I might do that at some point, maybe over the weekend, from like a Friday to a Monday. But currently you can see my holdings. Let's look at the holdings. I've got 40 holdings. I am still down because I think about 3,500 of the money went into my account prior to the market falling, but we're not down all that much. We're down less than 10%. We're kind of down, and so I'm going to keep on adding to this portfolio. Next time I'll talk a little bit more about how I've been allocating it and what I'm looking forward to. I saw autos coming up, which is kind of why I went a little bit into AXL. I've traded AXL before. In any event, waiting to see what's going to happen over the course of the day with the stock market. I'll be trading that during the morning before doing some streaming. For those who don't know, I also do enjoy streaming on Twitch. I am a Twitch streamer, so you might catch me streaming Twitch, which is why you kind of see the followers underneath me right here. That's because it's under my OBS. I have I forgot to take it down. Totally forgot. Anyways, hope everything is going well. Like I said, I'm hoping to see more and more companies require the use of masks for both employees as well as their customers, because it'll make it easier for them to do business. And of course, the more business they can do, the more jobs will basically stop losing. And of course, that's of course what we're looking forward to. We're looking forward to less people losing their jobs, more people coming off of unemployment than going on to unemployment. But we'll have to wait over the coming months to see. One area that I do know will be really impacted will be cruise lines. I'm not quite sure how cruise lines are going to do it, because it's a densely packed area. Things like bars and clubs, unless they move these venues and move them to outdoor portions, or allow portions of the streets to now be utilized for businesses, I don't see how many of these places are going to be able to do business, because it's hard to eat a meal with a mask. And of course, if you're taking it off, then you're just basically putting everybody at risk. And then most restaurants can't survive with just 50%, right? I think it's like a maximum of 50% occupancy. And if you don't have an outdoor portion, most of those, if you only have 50% of your customers in the restaurant, you only need 50% of the staff, and most businesses will not survive. Just in my neighborhood here in Manhattan on the Upper East Side, I've seen a lot of businesses close down, like forever. Like the for rent sign is up. A lot of those businesses stated, like they've shut down this location, etc., and going to someplace else, or they've shut down that location and are minimizing their locations going forward. So we'll have to wait and see how that is over the next coming months. But like I said, appreciate you guys watching. Take care. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a great day. Take care. God bless.